So I'm continuing on a series of Dharma talks that we're going to give on the Eightfold Path. And I'm going to talk today about views, skillful, appropriate views. Start with reading a little bit from our book entitled Reflective Meditation, Cultivating Kindness and Curiosity in the Buddhist Company. This is the book that Linda and I wrote during the pandemic, during lockdown, etc. A few words about the order of the path. We don't think there's an order. Rather than each area of development will hopefully enhance the others, that they entwine in a mutually supportive way. Though sometimes the Eightfold Path is taught in a specific order. That being said, we usually address views, and the word in Pali for views is ditti, first, because how we experience underlies everything, how we view experience underlies everything else. For example, if our dominant view is that life is mean and people are out to get us, we will likely speak to them in a defensive way, take protective actions, place our energy and intentions to protect ourselves. This will likely impact our choice of livelihood, etc. On the other hand, if our basic view is that life is a wonderland, a different path will follow, one which is ignorant of dukkha and may be lacking in compassion. So I realized as I read that this quote from our book really points to a view that's about the middle way, not the extremes, more thoughtful and ethical. I'm not going to come back to the middle way, though. That's a whole other series of talks, really, but not for today for me. So, but as I was writing this talk, I also became aware of how I often write Dharma talks, which is I look things up in different ways on the web in Linda and my shared Google files. And I take others people's words in writing and riff off of them. She does the same. I think other teachers do as well. And so I was thinking, this is maybe a way to get to skillful view. Because really, inherent in that process is the absence of arrogance, the arrogance that I know it all. But that, though, also absence of the perspective that someone else knows it all, or maybe knows it the way I do. Also inherent in this process is an awareness that what I know is just, I don't own it. It's just, as we were saying in our previous series of talks, it's not just I, me, and mine. And similarly, what they know is just not theirs. They don't own it. Our knowledge and our awareness is always cross-pollinating one another's knowledge and awareness. And that's what we're hoping for. And that sharing period at the end of our daily online meditations, but also this is part of how we teach reflective meditation in most all of our groups most all of the time. So we tend to give Dharma talks, but that's what we know. That's how we understand things. But then we also allot time to hear about how the Dharma, how you know and understand things, how these teachings are showing up in your life when you speak up during the sharing time. That's why it's such an important part of what we do together. So essential, really, because it's not just our understanding, it's all of our collective, well, not all of it, but much of our collective understandings cross-pollinating one another and leading to more understanding. So that being said, I'm going to read from a quote. This is a quote from Winton Higgins. He's our colleague over in Australia, and it's from a Dharma talk he gave to one of his Sanghas. But I had to adapt the words a bit because a few of the phrases didn't reflect how I understand things. So really, that's an example of what I was just speaking about. So Winton says, conventionally, samadhi, sama being the Pali word for skillful, appropriate, commonly translated as right, but I don't choose that. But anyway, conventionally, he says right view, but he thinks it's much closer to appropriate perspective. This doesn't refer to items of orthodox doctrine or supposed ultimate truths, but rather to a mindset or a working set of assumptions that would start with the avoidance of absolutes and an awareness of dependent arising. It is a mindset which remains at all times sensitive to what is ethically skillful and what isn't in a specific situation. So I've been playing around with rewriting things. I rewrote a sutta the other morning, and now I'm going to rewrite Witten's words, at least. And I'm not done with my rewrite, but this is my draft rewrite. So I'll start where he starts. Conventionally right view, but much closer to appropriate perspective. This doesn't refer to items of orthodox doctrine or supposed ultimate truths, but rather to a mindset. So this is where I start changing the words, starting with becoming aware of how we actually view things and reflecting upon, inquiring into, and at times questioning these views. How do they function? Do they lead to more care? Are they sensitive to what is ethically skillful and what isn't in a specific situation? And again, I could add on here about how we get sort of adapt our mindset, but I'll leave that to you. So going in a bit of a little different direction, we were talking about the Eightfold Path at my Friday morning meditation group. And humor came up. And this was identified as perhaps a subcategory of skillful view. And I thought about this some, and I'm going to think about it a bunch more, but really humor does change our view and sometimes lightens it, hopefully lightens it. I mean, it's a good humorous line can turn our assumptions and unconscious views like upside down quickly. Sometimes it's just a sentence or a phrase. And there are so many different forms of humor. Of course, I started to look that up, but one way I've really seen humor used, and I think it's how I use it, is as a response to dukkha. And really, this really did come up in the Friday group because someone commented that they loved my humor. And truthfully, I didn't really realize how much I did it till I needed someone else to help me be aware. And this particular Friday morning, it was last Friday, I was feeling particularly lighthearted and silly, maybe in response to political dukkha. I'm not exactly sure. But I have been aware for a while that my humor really, I grew up with that as part of my Jewish heritage. And so many comedians are Jewish. And I do really think that is as a response or a way to cope with the dukkha and oppression that Jews have historically, periodically experienced. So I think, but taking it in a little different direction, ethics is so important when it comes to humor. I can remember so much of my life being just so turned off by humor, which is derogatory. It puts people down who fall into certain groups or categories. And then I looked it up this morning, and there's a name for that humor. It's called insult humor. Now, this can sometimes, and it also can be about making fun of ourselves, but this can be done with really goodwill or ill will. And then here's what they said about insult comedy. When I looked up comedy, insult comedy is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's insulting. And those insults might be directed at the audience or directed at a common enemy that everyone in the audience loves to hate on. I wonder, first of all, if you get any audience of people that you're doing comedy with, do they all have the same enemy? Good. I don't know. But maybe what's more relevant is that insult humor can really foment hate. That is not the path in Buddhism. In Buddhism, the path is much more about reducing hatred, not fomenting it. So I leave you with some big questions. I don't expect you to necessarily answer them at all in this morning's meditation, or maybe, and certainly not completely, because they're too big. But what mindsets or perspectives really do reduce ignorance and lead to more wisdom. And what mindsets or perspectives actually reduce hate and lead to more care? And again, I don't ask that in a general way. I ask that in a more specific way. As you see your views, you can begin to filter or become more aware of what's going on in your views, your mindsets, and your perspectives that are leading to hate or leading to care, leading to ignorance, or leading to wisdom. So on that note, I will end the Dharma talk and we will meditate and see